Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by the generosity of the following companies. The Old Mill Press, publishing beautifully crafted books that illuminate our world. To learn more, visit theoldmillpress.com. And by listeners like you.
Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock Podcast. Proceed at your own risk and mark well me words, ladies. Dead men tell no tale.
Skull Rock Podcast, a show about all things Disney and pop culture. I'm Aljon Go, lifelong Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars fan. And you can email me, Aljon, A-L-J-O-N, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossard. I'm an artist, author, and filmmaker. And Aljon and I are here at the Animation Y'all Expo.
Yes.
And we are trying to do our wraparounds on the floor here while people are buzzing about.
Yes.
Aljon, it's been a great weekend here, hasn't it?
It's been awesome. You know, first of all, the fans that are coming out to the booth have been great. Checking out the lovely hot sauce that you brought. You dropped the hot sauce, and you brought a bunch of swag. Not to mention, you brought the book. You literally brought the whole book cart with you, Dan.
Oh, I know. I've been signing books all weekend. It's been fantastic. But, you know, I think this is the first... Well, first off, I want our listeners to know this is the first time that you and I are sitting next to each other doing the intros to our show.
I know, right?
We're right here. We're you know, as we're recording, Aljon's taking a couple of selfies he's going to put up on social media.
Yes.
And so, Aljon, we've got a great show. We've got Robert Lence, master story artist, Robert Lence, part 2 of our conversation with him. So that's going to be dropping.
Yes.
And, you know, again, we've got people wandering around. I know you've been interviewing our listeners all weekend.
Yeah, not only just listeners, but awesome artists that are here as well. Artists, animators, animation schools. They've been coming up, and everyone's just really interested, enthusiastic about the show. And I know that we had a few of our listeners come into the booth. We actually had one of our supporters there, Chris Banis, came by, and I know you wanted to give her a shout-out.
Oh, I absolutely wanted to give Chris a shout-out. She is one of the hosts of the Grand Circle Tour podcast,
yes.
You know, with Stan Solo. And Chris drove 3.5 hours to come to the Animation Y'all Expo and to visit with us. Yes. And I know you have a soundbite from her because she sat down with you yesterday.
Yeah, we're going to sprinkle those in over the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Just us being here at Animation Y'all. But, you know, we had people from all over. Utah, Virginia, Chicago, Texas. I mean,
Michigan.
You know, California, Michigan, of course, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida. I mean, they were coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, we've got people in from California. I mean, it's just been an awesome weekend with the animation community here in Nashville.
Yes.
And I've just been having a good time. I mean, I've been exhausted at the end of every day, I have to tell you.
This is your first time in Nashville, isn't it?
And it's my first time in Nashville.
How are you liking it so far?
I love it. It's a nice sized city. You know, it's like a comfortable sized city.
It is comfortable.
It really is. It's a comfortable sized city.
It is comfortable.
Except last night when the Predators game was getting let out of the arena. The traffic was a nightmare.
My wife was there for sure.
I thought I was in Los Angeles all of a sudden.
That's why I cut out early. You know, I had to avoid it and pick up the kills.
Yeah.
But being at Animation Y'all, a very exciting time here. Of course, Animation Y'all is the expo we've been talking about now for weeks here in Nashville. And Nashville is, as you say, the animation mafia of Nashville with the Bancroft brothers at the helm.
Yes.
And John Pomeroy is here. Aaron Blaise.
Yeah, I mean, Disney legend Mark Henn is here.
Yes.
Matt O'Callahan, people we've had on our show, you know. Aaron Blaise is here. He showed his Snow Bear film, which is fantastic. It's just been really a wonderful event, and it's sold out. I mean, sold out. It's craziness.
Looking forward to next year.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think instead of doing our mailbag this week, why don't you drop in one of the one of our listeners and what they had to say.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and check in with one of our live drops from Animation Y'all 2025 here in Nashville, Tennessee. Who am I speaking with?
Frankie Bay.
All right, Frankie. And you're a big fan of Skull Rock? Do you listen to the Skull Rock podcast?
I do.
You do? All right. Where are you from?
Dothan, Alabama.
Dothan, Alabama. All right. So why are you here at the expo today?
Well, me and my wife, we've attended other expos like CTN and everything.
Okay.
And we figured that if there's one in the Southeast, we're coming.
Awesome. Frankie, why do you like Skull Rock podcast?
It's very informative. It's entertaining. I like the sound of you guys' voice there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Keeps me company.
I love it. And do you have a particular favorite guest we've had so far?
It's been good. Just there's such a variety. It's hard to choose pinpoint a single episode.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, man, and thank you for coming all the way here from Dothan, Alabama, and enjoy the rest of the expo.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, Dave. We're back and still at Animation Y'all.
You know what? I mean, have you watched anything? Do you want to?
You know what? I did watch Captain America: Brave New World.
Oh, talk about that.
I thought Captain America: Brave New World was good for an Incredible Hulk sequel. It was Captain America shoehorning a Incredible Hulk sequel. And I thought it did a fair job. It had a lot to accomplish, but this is the thing about Captain America that drives me absolutely crazy, is that can't we just have a good standalone film? Does it have to always build? Why can't we just have little building blocks maybe at an end credit? I feel like there was so much weight and so much pressure, it just can't be a good standalone film.
Yeah.
That's my fair criticism. I thought Anthony Mackie did a great job. I thought Harrison Ford did a great job. I like all the characters and everything in it, but I just felt like it was a little bit too fast and loose and wanted to accomplish a lot. And in the end, it could have done an excellent job, but it just did a fair job. And that's not a bad thing for a Marvel movie. I mean, this is a rebuilding time for Marvel. Not all the Phase 1 movies did great, but I think it was a good watch.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I've been on the road for like 2 weeks now, and I appreciate you covering for me last week.
Yeah.
But I haven't gone to the movies. But interesting thing, I'm able to cast. You've heard about this? You can cast off of one of your devices.
Yes.
In our case, it's an iPad.
Yeah.
We're casting onto the TV in the hotel room.
Awesome.
Which is fantastic. And so we've been living in hotel rooms for the last week and a half or so now. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I watched the show. We found it on Amazon Prime. Mm-hmm. It's called Population 11.
Yeah.
And it is fantastic.
I heard great things about it.
They're half-hour episodes, and it is a fantastic show. I highly recommend this to our listeners. Okay. Stars Ben Feldman. When you see him, you'll recognize him. He's been in lots of stuff over the years. But it takes place in a town in the outback of Australia that had a population of 12, but one of the residents goes missing. So hence Population 11.
Yes.
And it is a quirky group of characters and fun stuff, including a guy that runs a UFO tour out of this little town. And I can't say enough things about it. And I really recommend that people go to Amazon Prime and check out Population 11.
And this is Australia?
Australia.
Oh, okay.
It's Australian television at its finest,
wow.
I have to say. And
okay.
I would tell folks that we have almost finished the season.
Wow.
And we've thoroughly enjoyed it. I believe there's 12 episodes.
I was going to say, you guys being on the road and devouring an entire season, you guys must really like it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So check out Population 11. That's all I'm going to recommend this week because, again, it's just been sort of chaotic for us.
I gotcha.
Traveling and doing this expo and getting back on the road this week. So that's all I have. And then as far as news goes, any news? There's no news.
There's a few passings, but I will say I did watch SNL 50.
I did too, by the way. I did watch that as well, and I would give it a middling review.
Yeah, same.
You know, because there were some sketches I thought out of the gate were really funny, but then they just went on too long.
It went on too long.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe about 45 minutes in, I was done.
Yes.
I was really done.
Yeah, I agree. Although we are going to watch the concert part of it on Peacock, probably when we get back home.
I feel like they're trying to write a love letter to the fans over the course of 50 years, that some of it got lost. But I tell you what, man, you know, you're in high demand, Dave. So I think what we'll do is we'll just take a pause real quick.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Why don't we just go ahead and run the Robert Lence Part 2 interview?
Sure. Let's go ahead and do it.
Let's just do that, and we'll come back and wrap things up.
Absolutely. Sit back and relax. Robert Lence Part 2 right here on Skull Rock Podcast.
Let's do it.
Skull Rock Podcast. Interview time.
Well, Aljon, we're back again for week 2 with Robert Lence, story artist and all-around great teacher. He's teaching up at Cal Arts now. Robert, welcome back to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave, and thank you so much for having me, Aljon. It's great to be here.
So, you know, Robert, we left off last week with you talking about your work on Beauty and the Beast. What did you go on to after Beauty and the Beast? What was the next project?
Good question. So from Beauty and the Beast, I rolled off onto The King of the Jungle, which became The Lion King.
Right. That was what they were calling it originally, right? King of the Jungle.
King of the Beasts.
Yeah.
With the large cat mammals, you know, whatever. So I was one of like the first dozen or so people on Lion King in like early development. And, you know, small story department back then. We were in a building on the other side of Flower Street. I think it was 1514 Flowers, like a red brick building. And that was like Disney development for a number of years. They were just renting the building. And that's where I worked.
That was the building north of the 1420 building, the red brick building.
Would have been on the other side of Sonora from the main 1420 Flower Street.
So it was on the north side of Sonora.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I know that building because some of the Fantasia 2000 team was put into that.
Oh, okay. Right.
Which would have been probably after you guys were working in there on King of the Jungle.
Right.
Or the Lion King.
Right. It was a humble building. I remember, you know, like my little office, you know, butted up against a sliding corrugated metal door. So that every time somebody new would move into the building, like the back door of my cubicle, the door would slide up and people would be, you know, moving in and everything. So anyway, it was humble, you know, office space, but, you know, went on to be a great film. So I worked in early development. I worked, particularly the hyenas. I did a lot of early work, like defining the hyenas characters, how they would be different, how each one of them would be different. And then from development, I then transitioned into storyboarding on it, and I storyboarded on it.
So when you were developing the hyenas, I mean, did each of the hyenas' personalities sort of run the gamut until you sort of came up with what you felt was the right chemistry, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, when I was sort of developing, it was sort of my task to do that. I tried to differentiate them, how are they different, how are they alike, whatever. But, you know, as you know, Dave, the big thing is that when they cast it, it's everything, you know. So when they cast Whoopi Goldberg, when they cast everybody, that's when it really, you know, goes up.
The characters really sort of solidified.
Right, and they designed the characters to look like them and everything. Yeah. So that's how that all happened.
Yeah.
And then I went into production boarding on it, you know, and I boarded on it and everything. And I think we had changed buildings at that point. I think we were back into Airway. And
I know there were some director changes that happened on it, but you continued working through all of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and you know, still friends with, you know, with all three, you know, directors, all great guys. And it's a film that took a while to sort of find itself. It was sort of like the problem child.
Yeah.
The studio and people, you know, so it was sort of a problem child, a problem project, but finally found its legs.
Yeah, and we've on this Skull Rock podcast, we've talked about this from time to time with different guests. The Lion King was the film that a lot of people didn't want to work on. They were all trying to bypass it to get onto Pocahontas because
Right.
they didn't think it was going to be a hit movie. Who wants to see African lions talking and all that kind of stuff, right?
What I always quote, to my students when I teach and everything is the great William Goldman, the great screenwriter, in his book Adventures in the Screen Trade. And he said, in Hollywood, people have big titles and big names and everything. But in the end, nobody really knows how a film will do until it comes out. So he said, in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. Nobody really knows how a film will do until it actually
Right.
comes. And it's very true about Lincoln. People were begging off to it. I remember I was friends, with Kelly Asbury, and Kelly was
Yeah.
like, I want to work on this. He left to go to San Francisco and work on Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach. He was like,
Right. Yeah.
he left town. So it sort of took a long time to sort of define its legs. What did I want to say about the two? So I remember one field trip that we did on Lion King, like in early development. We met, like at Flower Street, and we took like two vans down to the San Diego Zoo to draw the lions.
Yeah.
So and it was the whole like story department. So we get down there, and we're at the front gate, and the zoo director meets us, and he's like, "Okay, what do you want to draw?" Well, it was like we're working on a film called The Lion King, so like to draw the lions because we don't have any lions here. Like, what? What do you mean? The San Diego? He's like, we don't have any lions. He's like, so he's like, we have feral cats in the parking lot. It's like, no, we didn't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drive 2.5 hours on the San Diego freeway to draw feral cats in the parking lot. Like, we wanted here to draw the lions. So, the one of like the associate producer, whatever, like arranged that trip. He was not long for this Disney World, unfortunately.
Wow.
So we went to the San Diego Zoo to draw lions, only to find out they had no lions.
Wow. That's major. I mean, that's easy to find out, don't you think, by picking up the phone and calling somebody?
Yeah, I mean, we drew meerkats, we drew other, animals or whatever, but we did not.
Why didn't they have lions at the
I don't
San
know,
Diego Zoo?
and I looked it up and it says they have them now. I don't know. Maybe they were on hiatus. Maybe they had like vacationing back in the French Riviera or something. I don't know. They were not there that day. And they said, you can't draw the lions. So,
Wow.
and that was like the Disney story department went down. It was like Kirk Wise, Gary Trousdale,
Yeah.
Andrews, Brenda Chapman, Kevin Lima. We got up, like 5 o'clock in the morning to drive down there, and like no lions. So we drew, meerkats. I don't know if that's how the meerkat got a bigger role, but
But
so,
but they did bring lion cubs into the studio,
and
though,
later
right?
on they got
Yeah.
smart. They were like, no, we're not going to go all the way down there. We're going to bring the lions to Disney, to the studio.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and they did that, and the animators are drawing the lions and everything.
Yeah.
So finally they wised up on that. But yeah, it was very much like the project that like people didn't want to work on everything. All the, a lot of the Top Gun animators sort of went on to the next one and everything. So
Yeah.
it also just shows like one of the things that William Goldman says in his book, Adventures in the Screen Trade, is that nobody really knows how a film will do until it's out there. I've worked on lots of projects that you thought people were so confident this is a surefire hit, this can't miss, and it does. And other stuff like The Lion King, where they go, hey, nobody wants to work on this, and then it finds its legs, it gets better, time, and then it becomes the hit that it is.
Yeah, and I think also it has a lot to do with all the components that are going into it, right? Because the music has a big part in so many of these animated films, and if you have great songs and a great score, that's also gives it a leg up.
Right, sure. It's like all the great Elton John.
I mean, we've all gone and seen animated films that, because the songs were so fantastic, it sort of carries the movie.
Yes.
Because without those songs, the movie was, middling.
Right. When you think of Disney films, it's the music goes, it's such an important component in the films.
Sure.
What else? My fucking
And Lion King really was the pinnacle of the box office success during the Renaissance.
right. It was the first one to be like $1 billion film.
Yeah, and it was, in my mind, anything that came after that could never reach those heights at the box office
Right, right.
for the rest of the decade.
Yes. And what else about that? So I knew when Rob came on the film, Rob Minkoff, he had been my story teacher at CalArts. So so he came on the film and sort of helped to define a lot of the comedy and the things that sort of made it.
Yeah,
And so he it really I know all the three directors and they were all great on it.
yeah,
But it sort of took a different angle. Like Rob brought more of like a comedy element to it.
yeah.
And shortly afterwards, during Lion King, I actually left the studio, which is another story. I'll tell you my next adventure after that. But I was renting a room from Rob in his house. I was living at Rob's house. So even though I had left the project, I got to hear like his stories about like the making of the film, and he would like pitch me the ideas and everything. It's like you could tell like it was getting better and better until it became the hit that it was. It sort of took more of a comic angle, everything,
Right.
and then became the mega hit that it was.
Now you said you left the Lion King. What did you go on to?
So I left Lion King. So why did I leave? So
Did you leave Disney?
I did. I left the studio. So it's all, every time I've gotten a job, it is always, based on connections. So one of my best friends at Disney, one of my good friends was Pichot Hunt. We worked together on Rescuers Down Under. He was the art director of it. And he left to go to Hanna-Barbera Turner. Ted Turner had just bought Hanna-Barbera and
Right.
wanted to compete against Disney and do big budget features. So Pichot Hunt and Joy Every was one of like the execs who left Disney and went with him too. They convinced me to leave Disney and to come and to work on Hanna-Barbera Turner's films. They were going to start making films. The first one was called The Page Master.
Right.
It was Macaulay Culkin vehicle.
Yeah.
And it was, why did I leave? Like a promotion and a raise. I was made head of story and for a raise too.
Well, and that makes sense.
Yeah. And we worked on two films. So worked on Page Master as a head of story, and then went on to Cats Don't Dance with Mark Dindal and Rick Schneider, Calabash.
Yeah, and that was also a Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah. We did
Yeah.
two films basically, and then unfortunately there was like, rumblings that the studio was going to be bought by Warner Brothers. And as you know, Dave, like when there's rumors and rumblings in Hollywood, they invariably end up being true.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire.
right. And what do they say? Rats deserve a sinking ship, or artists, leave a studio that might be going under. So we were all looking around. Funny story about that. I go, then you start relying upon your connection. So I knew the Pixar guys from my CalArts days. Andrew Stanton was 2 classes older than me at CalArts, and
Yeah.
Pete Tucker was 1 class younger. The connection to them too is we all had our films in Spike and Mike's Festival of Animation. We used to go down to La Jolla when the films would play and everything. So I sort of bonded with those guys, and it always had kept in touch with them. It always comes back to like the CalArts connections or Disney connection.
The Cal Arts Mafia.
Hey. So they were like, hey, we're up in San Francisco. We're ratcheting up here. We're making films. Why don't you come up for, a visit? So I came up for a visit. So funny story about that. I think I called in sick, at work and went up to San Francisco, flew up there, and interviewed and everything. And when I was there, they were like, hey, that's funny. Jason Katz was here yesterday. He was also on Cats Don't Dance as well. We were both on that film, and we both called in sick on successive days. He like on Monday and me like on Tuesday. He just called in with a cold. I think I was a little more creative. I think I said I had scarlet fever or something. More creative. And then I made a miraculous recovery like the next day later, right? We're like, boy, you sure got over that fast. I was like, well, a couple of Alka-Seltzer Plus did the trick. So
You got hired up there.
Yeah, so how did I get hired? So Joe Rampt,
Right.
who
Joe was head of story, wasn't he?
and he was leaving, believe it or not, he was leaving to go to keep a previous commitment to Henry Selick to work on James and the Giant Peach.
Right, right.
So he was leaving Pixar, so they were looking for a replacement as head of story. So that's the job that I interviewed for. It seemed like it was going to happen. It went away for a couple of months and then it came back, and then I took it, and that happened in the summer of 1994. I moved up to San Francisco and I replaced, or you can never replace Joe Rampt. I was made co-head of story,
Right.
which Joe is our final credit in the film. So I started at Pixar in the summer of 1994, small studio, 150, art. I think I was like employee number 150. You knew everybody by name. There was
Yeah.
like a photo wall. It was like a little mom and pop place in very humble office.
That was sort of in an office park, right?
In
At
a
that point.
very nondescript office park in
Yeah.
Point, California, which was kind of an odd little town. It was like a little Twin Peaks-esque type town. It's like
Yeah.
this town. So, and that's where very humble office park, very humble office space. And that's where the first couple of films were done, because it was very much of an untested thing. Like Disney didn't know what they had. They were like, there's these two quirky studios up in San Francisco, the Skellington and Pixar, and they're both sort of off kilter and quirky and whatever,
Yeah.
that it would become what it would become. So I started in the summer of 1994, replacing Joe Rampt as a co-head of story.
Yeah.
And a lot of the story was already in place. So like Buzz and Woody and everything was already created and everything. But some of the, parts were more, parts of the film were a little bit more unsettled. I wasn't there for like the recording sessions for like Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. However, I did get to go to the recording sessions for Don Rickles,
Nice.
for Mr. Potato Head. And we were down in LA with, John and Andrew and Pete. And so we're down in LA recording Don Rickles at, at LA studios. And we record them as, they record the actors, they do all the lines. Then we do like all the grunts and groans, whatever, from when they get knocked in the head. And then they were like, is there anything else that we need to get from Don? We have a little bit of time, left over. We already paid for the time. So I raised my hand to John. I said, well, how about, he's got to say his signature line, hockey puck, yeah, you're a hockey puck. What are you looking at, you hockey puck? So John goes, write it out, Robert. So I scribbled it on a piece of paper. John took the paper, ran it into Don Rickles. He read the line, and the line ends up in the film.
That's awesome.
And I then boarded that little scene when we got back to Point Richmond. I boarded that little piece. A lot of the film was already done in animatic, but there were some unfinished parts like that. So I boarded that little piece. And when I boarded it, funny story, I boarded it with the NHL logo on the hockey puck. The producers saw that and they said, we are not going to pay the NHL $1.5 million to use their logo. Sorry about that. So in the final film, it's just like a generic, hockey puck.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I can't say I was there for the creation of Woody. I can't say I was there for the creation of Buzz, but I can say that I had a hand in creating the hockey puck.
Nice.
The hockey puck. And I'm hoping, Dave, on one of these, I think Toy Story 5 is already in the works. I think they're already far along. But Toy Story 6, I'm really hoping it's like going to be the hockey puck's shining moment. That's our vehicle. Toy Story 6, starring the hockey puck, pucking around.
But so you did the work you did work on Toy Story, but you went on to Bug's Life, right?
I did. So as we were wrapping up on Toy Story, most of the studio, 95% of the studio was finishing up on Toy Story, and I was part of the advanced team to go on. Disney saying like, what's the next one? What's the next one? And so, that came out of when you watch the making of videos, it's true.
Yeah.
Like it came out of a story pitch. It was like John sent Joe Rampt and Andrew Stanton off to Hidden City Diner, which is like our unofficial cafeteria, brainstorm, come up with ideas. And, Joe Rampt says, Seven Samurai with bugs. And they both have a chuckle. And then Andrew says, hey, wait a minute, that's actually not a bad idea. So that was the germ of the, idea.
Yeah.
So I was one of the first 3 people on Bug's Life. For the first year of its existence, Bug's Life was me, Andrew Stanton, and Jason Katz in a conference room coming up with ideas, brainstorming ideas, doing early preliminary boards and everything, finding the characters. We would get, John's time when he was taking breaks from Toy Story. He would meet with us periodically. He'd come in and weigh in and, green light what, he was going to do. But, he was still, finishing up on Toy Story. So for the first year of his existence, it was really myself, Andrew Stanton, and Jason Katz in a conference room, just putting out ideas on the walls, what's going to stick, what's going to make it.
And did you stay on to board the movie and then did you leave then go back down to Los Angeles?
I did. I boarded on Bugs Life for maybe like a little less than a year, and boarded on that. A great story about that too. In those pitch meetings, a lot of times was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was very hands-on.
Yeah.
We didn't see him as much on Toy Story, but on Bugs Life, he was very present and wanted to be in the story pitches. So we pitched many times to Steve Jobs. Sometimes he would bring people from Apple, like his trusted, people to look at stuff too. And so that was kind of a thrill and really neat to be and to see his, he had a very sharp story mind as well.
Did you think that was because of the success of Toy Story?
Yeah, I mean, he was, he was around, but on Bugs Life, he was very hands-on,
Yeah.
And we pitched him many times, pitched to Steve many times, and he had great ideas and great notes too.
And how did you find him? Was he personable?
He was always very polite and personable and wonderful.
Yeah,
absolutely, and had good ideas too. I mean, one of the sharpest minds of his generation. So, and had amazing input and ideas too. It was very sharp.
And why did you leave?
So, as is often the case, I tell students to after I initially got hired based on my student film and portfolio, after that first time, I don't think I ever got hired by portfolio again. The classic thing was it's all a business of connections. Like a friend just got made director, so they're going to bring me on the project.
Right.
So that's what happened on this. A friend of mine, Kelly Asbury, was being made, had this new project, going on or had been assigned to it at this new startup company, Dreamworks. And so I was down in LA visiting for something else, and he was like, "Oh, Robert, we got to talk." Yeah. So I wound up leaving Pixar to go to DreamWorks to work on the first Shrek.
And how was that as an experience?
That was amazing. It was great. And again, it's sort of fun to be in the early days of a studio. So I was part of two startups. I wasn't there right from the start of Pixar, but I was there pretty early on for the first film, and to see the, spirit decor and the energy and everything of that, all the goodwill that went into that first, film at Pixar. And then, in the same way at DreamWorks, it was we're going to show the world what we can do. We're a startup studio and everything.
And were they at the Amblin complex over at Universal initially, or because they didn't have the brand new studio?
No,
at that point.
I remember when they were building the the DreamWorks campus as is now.
Yeah.
They had the Amblin. Some of our meetings were in the Amblin offices, which is pretty amazing. Steven Spielberg offices. But we were in the edge of the Universal lot, sort of near where the Smokehouse restaurant is.
Oh, yeah. So the back end of the Universal property.
But we did get passes onto the Universal lot, so you could walk around and drive around the Universal lot, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. And
again, great, energy of a startup studio and everything. We're going to show the world what we can do. Funny thing is that the first film out of the gate was going to be Prince of Egypt, and most people were on that. And then Shrek wasn't that highly regarded or well thought of. We got, it just, people didn't think that was going to be the big hit. It was sort of
what were they betting on?
The Prince of Egypt was going to be the golden child,
and that was the film that laid an egg.
Everybody thought, it's still well regarded and everything, but compared to when you look back, compared to what Shrek became, it became their Mickey Mouse. It became their
exactly.
And if you would have told us back then, this film that you're working on, Shrek, is going to be the biggest thing, it's going to be their Mickey Mouse, we would have just laughed. It was a troubled project. So there's a lesson in there too, Dave, that I worked on a couple of films like that, that were sort of the less wanted, like the Dog Project, the project that people were begging off of, were Lion King and Shrek, and they both became the iconic brands of each of their studios for Disney
Yeah.
DreamWorks. It just goes to show one of my favorite books about Hollywood, the great William Goldman, screenwriter, Adventures in the Screen Trade. And his great line is, in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. Nobody knows how a film will do
Yeah.
until it comes out. Nobody knows. And it's very true. Like when you're working on it, you never would have thought. And each of those films, if you would have said with Lion King and Shrek, these are going to be the biggest things in the world. They're going to be, mega hits, would never have believed it.
Yeah. No, listen, it's so true because, we've all worked on movies where you're kind of going, oi, I don't know about this. And then it goes out and it's a huge hit. And then the ones you're super excited about, they don't seem to resonate.
Well, it just shows you just never know. They
Yeah.
were so sure that, Prince of Egypt was going to be the big mega hit. And, Shrek was like, was way down the totem pole.
And the other thing too was that it was with Prince of Egypt it was sort of a short-lived entry into animation, doing a 2D feature.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Right. And Shrek 2 was going to be groundbreaking in that originally it was going to be motion capture. And we worked in very like humble, besides that building on the edge of the Universal lot, we also worked in like smaller buildings in the Glendale area, sort of like that Flower Street area. And they had a big sound stage built and they had like a giant Shrek outfit with all of the, the 3D things on it.
The little ping pong balls
had like
all
a
over
big
it.
giant like Shrek, figure walking around and stuff like that. And it was going to be motion capture. Jeffrey, pitched us the idea when he first, pitched us the idea. It was like he had taken a film, like a USC student film made by the Propeller Heads, a test, and he was going to put it together with motion capture, and that was going to be Shrek. They did a test, and I guess it didn't go over that well. And that was the thing that he said, no, it'll be like a traditional, 3D film. And that's when they brought in PDI and everything.
PDI, yeah.
Right. But there was a.
They not only brought it in, they bought PDI.
Right.
Yeah,
Hey,
so.
if you can, might as well buy them if you can.
What was it? PDI stood for what? Pacific Data Imaging or something like that?
Yeah. They did all the DreamWorks in the early DreamWorks film.
Yeah.
Funny thing about the early days of Shrek 2, it was a total it was when Jeffrey pitched me the film in his office, like I'm going to take this test from the Propeller Heads, USC guys, going to match it with this children's book by William Steig, and to star Chris Farley. It was a total Chris Farley vehicle. That was the reason for the film. And we had, brought Chris Farley in for the recording sessions. We went to dinner with him several times for him to get to know the story crew and everything. And
how was he?
He was wonderful to work with, Dave. He was like a big kid. He was like so eager to please and to like, let me try it this way. His great, improv background, right, at Second City and doing, Saturday Night Live. He was just a great improv actor. So he, sometimes in recording sessions, they bring him in and they do the lines, they finish the lines and they leave. He was very like, let me try it this way. Let me try it that way. How about if he's this way? So he was wonderful to work with on that. He was like a big kid, eager to please. Yeah. And we did get to know him a little bit and went out to dinner with him and everything. And it was devastating when it happened, what happened.
When he died.
Yeah, I came to work one day and the receptionist had tears in his eyes. It's like, oh no, what happened? And they were like, Chris Farley died. Chris is gone. And at that point, we thought, that's it. They're going to cancel the project. That's going to be it. But and then there was like a big meeting scheduled like in an hour. So we're all like, they're going to cancel the project. We had the meeting with Jeffrey, and to Jeffrey's credit, he was very steadfast. He was like, no, we're going to recast and we're going to do the film. And it's funny that it winds up becoming like their Mickey Mouse.
Wow.
So he stayed the course, made the film, and it becomes the biggest thing. What else about, we did get to know Chris, and we said we went out to dinner. When I got to go to the recording sessions, and I got to be in the recording session with Chris Farley in the booth, and I would do the donkey lines, and he would do the Shrek lines. And I did the same thing for Eddie Murphy. We flew to Miami, which is like a story in itself. We flew to Miami on the DreamWorks private jet to record Eddie Murphy in Miami, and I got to be in the booth with him, and I read the Shrek lines as he read the donkey lines.
All right. Now, how was Eddie Murphy? because
Eddie
you
Murphy,
hear all these stories like you can't look him in the eyes and stuff like that, which I think you tell me, how was he?
Dave, he was so gracious and wonderful, and against type of what you would expect. So on
Good.
Saturday Night Live, he's a wild man, he's a crazy man, right? Wild card. He was very controlled, professional. What are my lines?
Consummate professional.
Calm,
That's always nice
superb.
to.
And
Yeah.
it's a great lesson too in like Hollywood, like they're not what they seem. Like you realize
Yeah.
it's all an act. All of his crazy wild man stuff. He's actually very kind, professional. When the session was over, he's like, "You, Robert, you did a great job reading the lines. Thank you very much." He couldn't have been more professional.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the lesson in that too. I was going to say earlier too with the other line readings I did with Don Rickles. Don Rickles, known as being the insult comic, right? Being mean, insult comic, So he could in real life and in person, he was the opposite of that. He couldn't have been more kind and gracious. I've been to a few of the recording sessions. You get to be there with the A-list actors and actresses, and sometimes, they can have an ego, whatever. Don Rickles had no ego, and he was more interested in you than he was in himself. He was like,
Yeah.
"Robert, tell me what you do. You're an animator. What do you do?" and everything. He was the only one who was more interested in other people.
I don't know. I don't know if you feel this. I kind of feel this and have this view that the older actors and actresses in the business are more grounded
Yes,
because I think they came up the through the
right.
school of hard knocks,
Yeah, they paid their
and
dues, and
yeah, because I've had the pleasure of working with like Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke and John Cleese and people like that, and I find that they're all incredibly nice people to deal with. They're very professional. They're very talented, but then when you get into some of the younger actors who are almost flash in the pan, they're difficult.
yeah, that's going to often be the case too. And like those, everybody you mentioned, like they paid their dues, they didn't get quick early success, and they have a real air of humility to them. And
Yeah.
Bob Rickles and Eddie
I
Murphy did, and they were wonderful.
I work I just very quick because I want to hear more of your stories, but I worked with a child actor. He was like 8 or 10 years old in London, and he would do the line and go, "Well, I think you got it." I mean, it was that kind of an attitude. You were just like, and you're thinking to yourself, well, this guy's going to be, lying in the gutter with a needle in his arm at some point, when his phone stops ringing.
Yeah, but some of those older, more seasoned guys, Don Rickles, like they had
Yeah.
paid their knocks, and like I said, he couldn't have been more, kind and gracious. So
Yeah. And it's always pleasant when you
yeah,
have those experiences because, and also talking about them because, there's a lot of people listening to the program who go, "Wow, that's so great to hear that person is a nice person."
yes, that's always nice when you hear that too. Funny thing about Don Rickles too, he was from my neighborhood in Queens. He went to the same high school that my cousins went to, Newtown High School.
And did you have a
I didn't
conversation
know that
about that?
back then. I wish I would have known
Oh,
that back then.
yeah.
I didn't know it back then. It
Yeah.
was pre, Google and internet where you could just look things up. I didn't
Sure.
find out until years later that he went to the same high school as my cousins went.
Wow. Wow. That's
He
wonderful.
was a Queens guy, just like you and me, Dave.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. I was only a Queens guy for a little while until my parents moved out onto the island.
Oh, out to Long Island. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Where
So
in Long
I
Island?
I grew up out in Massapequa
Oh, okay.
on the south shore of the
Okay.
island. Yeah.
We have a home in Port Jefferson for years.
Well, there you go.
Right.
Beautiful.
Long Island
Yeah.
Railroad. Yeah.
Long Island Railroad. There you go. I kind of feel like we're at a good place to maybe stop, and we'll pick it up next week with episode 3. Okay?
It's great to me, Dave. Thank
How's
you.
that sound? All right. Well, once again, story artist Robert Lence. It's so great to have you on the Skull Rock podcast, and we'll see you again next week for episode 3 of our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave, and thank you, Al John. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, this is John Pomeroy, animator, producer, artist, and you are listening to Skull Rock Podcast.
Skull Rock Podcast. Exploring the outer reaches of the Disney galaxy.
Oh, wow, you flew magnificent. All right, Robert Lence, part 2 wrapped up. Dave, it's great that Robert was in here to chat a little bit more.
You know, I mean, he's such a nice guy, and, you know, I saw some people post on our social media channels that, you know, one guy said he was the best teacher he's ever had.
Wow,
I mean, you know, Robert's not only a master story artist, but just a nice guy, and it was just so thrilling to be able to have him on the show for part 2, and next week we're going to run part 3 of our interview with him, which is just fantastic, you know, to wrap up him talking about his career in the animation business.
Unprecedented. Well, that's awesome. Looking forward to part 3. And once again, we're live here at the Animation Y'all Expo here at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. Wrapping things up, Dave. To wrap things up, what would you say is a great takeaway from this expo here for the first time ever in Nashville?
You know, what I think is a great takeaway from the Animation Y'all Expo is that it's brought together the animation community in this region of the country. And there are people, again, who have traveled here from, you know, Florida and Virginia and Michigan and, you know, the sort of East Coast, Midwest area. And what's really terrific about this is anytime you get a community of people together, in this case, animation and comic art people, you get all these artists together. It's just a wonderful experience because everybody's helping one another out. Everybody's recommending other people to people that are coming to the booths. And you know, the other thing too, Aljon, is we met so many listeners. It's kind of overwhelming how many people listen to this podcast.
Exciting,
I mean,
right?
it's unbelievable. And so that's been exciting. And you know, I think that we'll give our listeners a rest. We won't really be talking about the Animation Y'all Expo too much after the next couple weeks of dropping some of the people we recorded. But you can be darn sure that by the end of the year, we'll be bringing it up for the second annual Animation Y'all Expo.
It's not a bad thing.
I know.
Once again, gang, thank you so much for listening. If you like our podcast, please make sure you spread the word. Like, share, and subscribe. We're on all your social media, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're all there. Dave and I are both on there as well. You can follow me, Aljon Go, on Instagram. You can also check me out on the Dining at Disney podcast. We drop an episode every single week now, talking about the Festival of the Arts and going on right now at Epcot. And you know, Dave, that's all I wrote. So how about you?
Well, you know something, I usually give a whole bunch of plugs at the end when I'm wrapping things up, but I'm not going to do that this week other than to say thank you for covering for me last week.
Yeah.
I'm here this week because we're in Nashville, but I won't be here again next week, so you're going to cover for me again, which I appreciate, but I'll be back the week after,
there you go.
And we'll be back to sort of a normal schedule after that.
Yeah.
We've got some great guests coming up, and with that, I'm just going to say, folks, go out and have a fantastic week ahead. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you back here next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.
Since you know you're going already and you're planning that trip, you might as well save time, money, and aggravation, and don't book directly with Disney, because if these deals come up, you're not going to be able to take advantage of these great deals. And not only can you save up to 30% or more at Walt Disney World with this particular deal, but you can also save a lot on the new Adventures by Disney trips to Disneyland, as well as Adventures by Disney, if I hadn't already said that. Also, yes, Chris. Universal and Epic Universe. Yes, there's a lot of deals going on
Epic Universe.
And,
Not too much longer. May.
Yeah.
Opening in May. I am so ready.
Yeah,
I cannot wait to check that out.
I know it might be blasphemous to say that we're looking forward to seeing Universal on a Disney podcast.
Oh, dark! I want to go to the whole Dark World area.
I want to see it all. I want to see it all. So
I do, but we know I like horror movies, so
I do too. Opportunities to save you time and money. Kristen, where can people
go ahead and contact you to take advantage of deals?
They can contact me at themeparksandcruises@gmail.com.